All right, just for a little fun, we're going to take the paint that we did and have a race. Welcome back to Left Brain Artist. Today we're going to look at what the best paint for acrylic paint pouring is. Now I know this is absolutely a personal choice. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, but I want to look at the 5 of the most common paints, at least in the United States. Blick Studio Acrylic, Arteza Acrylic, Artist Loft, which is the Michaels brand of acrylic, Liquitex Basics, and then a craft paint. In this case we have Apple Barrel. And what we're going to do, we're going to look at the consistency of each of these paints by themselves. We're going to paint a swatch of each of these paints by themselves, and then we're going to progressively add more pouring medium. We're going to do just a little bit, a normal amount, and a lot. Put it on this watercolor paper that I have here, which is the paper that I use for doing my acrylic paint pouring tests because it's so thick and holds up well to the paint. We're going to let it all dry and see which paint, 1, is the most pigmented, 2, holds its color as we add more pouring medium, and 3, the ones that are the easiest to work with. So let's get to it. Alright, we've got the first swatch of paint. This is straight paint for each one. So just really quickly, the Blick, it went on quite nicely, quite heavy. I didn't have to get a lot on the brush. The Arteza is by far the most pigmented. Really, to get a nice blue, you'd have to add a medium or something to it to kind of break that down, but it by far has the most, with Blick the next, Liquitex, Artist Loft, and Apple Barrel. That's what it looks like for the pigmentation. The Artist Loft and the Liquitex went on about the same way. They're a little softer than the other ones, not as much paint got on the brush when I was putting it down, so I actually had to diff the brush twice, which was interesting. And then Apple Barrel went on, again it's slightly different color, but I had to dip 2 or 3 times to get a nice color swatch. So again, this is plain. There is nothing added to this. This is just the paint. And now we're going to move to, I did 5 grams of paint for each of these, and next I'm going to add 5 grams of pouring medium, mix it up and do the same thing. Alright, so we're back. We have now added 5 grams of pouring medium, which is Flood Floetrol, to this mixture. And then I've poured the color swatches. Hey, if this is the type of content you are interested in, please subscribe, hit the bell icon, and get notified every time we have a new video. Now really closely, I want to get a close-up of each of these. So here's the Blick. With 5 milligrams, it's kind of thin and the color has really dropped down. Here is the Arteza. The color is still really dark and it's still really thick. Here's the Artist Loft. The color has dropped down a little bit, and it is a little bit thin also. We have the Liquitex. The color retained quite well with the Liquitex, and it is still a bit thick. Not quite as thick as the Arteza, but it's still a bit thick. And the Apple Barrel is liquid, really, and the color has come down slightly. So here is the a Blick. As you can see, the color changed dramatically with just 5 grams of pouring medium, so even parts paint and pouring medium. Arteza, still very dark. Artist Loft has lightened up a bit, not as much as the Blick, but more than Arteza or Liquitex. There's the Liquitex. It has lightened a little bit, but the color is still pretty much the same. And then Apple Barrel, you can see that it lightened up quite a bit. So again, that was 5 grams of pouring medium, the exact same amount of paint that we have. The next one we're going to go to is I'm going to add 5 more grams, so 1 part paint, 2 part pouring medium, which is normally the ratios I use for a lot of paints that I use. Alright, now we've gone to 10 grams of pouring medium, 5 grams of paint, or 2 to 1 pouring medium to paint ratio. The Blick has gotten a tiny bit lighter, The Arteza, there's barely a difference that I can see. Artist Loft has gotten a tiny bit lighter also. Liquitex, just a little bit. It did get a lot more runny after putting this thing of pouring medium. The apple barrel is almost like watercolor at this point. It was very hard to get a nice dark swatch. So now to get a quick close-up. So here's the Blick with 2 parts pouring medium, 1 part paint. It's still pretty thick. The Arteza is very thick still. The Artist Loft is starting to get a little bit runny. See how it's coming off of that quite easily. Liquitex, still quite a bit thick also. It's retaining quite a bit of color. And this is just soupy watery. And then just to get a good idea of the colors there, there's the Blick, Arteza, Artist Loft, Liquitex, and apple barrel. And now we're going to move on to 4 parts pouring medium, 1 part paint. So essentially I'm going to add 10 grams more of pouring medium. Okay, we've done the final swatches. This is 20 grams of pouring medium, 5 grams of paint, or a 4:1 pouring medium to paint ratio. All of them are much more liquid. Really right now the Arteza is the only one that I would actually be adding water to at a 4:1 ratio to get the right consistency using Floetrol and paint. These 3, Blick, Artist Loft, and Liquitex, I probably wouldn't add any more water. 4:1 would do it if this is the type of colors that I wanted. And then the apple barrel is just too thin at this ratio. So I want to get a better look at the consistency of each of these. This is the Blick. And the consistency of this is, again, that's about right where I'd want to be for a regular pour. And then you can see the color there, how it's mixed. The Arteza, this is actually a little bit thicker than I would want it. Again, I would need to add a little bit of water. This is 4:1 pouring medium ratio. The Artist Loft, again like the Blick, it's about where I'd want it to be for a pour. The Liquitex, I might add a tiny bit of water. This is the next thickest to this one. And then the apple barrel at 4:1, it's super runny at this point. And just really quickly to give you a good idea of the swatches, this one has the best color from the original to the new. I think the next one, it's kind of a toss-up between Liquitex and Artist Loft at 4:1. Liquitex won here at 2:1. It was the better color, but at 4:1, they've both lightened up a ton. Blick lightened up quite a bit, although the consistency is a little bit better for the Blick. As you can see, when I put the paint on, it went on better and didn't break up as much as the other two. So honestly, right now, my choices would probably be Arteza first, a tie between Liquitex and Blick for second, probably depending on the colors, then Artist Loft, then Craft Paint. So here are the final dried results. Ultimately, the Arteza is going to be the best paint here. It had the most pigment. You'd have to use the least amount of paint in order to get the color that you want. The second would be Blick for me, that had the best color savings at a 4:1 paint to pouring medium ratio. Third is Liquitex, fourth Artist Loft, and fifth Apple Barrel. So just another quick thing to note, the race that we did, the paints are starting to dry, and if you can see the black marker through the Liquitex and the Artist Loft. Absolutely cannot see it through the Arteza, and you cannot see it through the Blick. So that's just another reason why I think these are probably the better paints to use. They're going to get you further, they're going to cost you less, and work better in your acrylic paint pouring. Now, the only other consideration that I'd say here is Blick and Liquitex actually have Lightfast 1 ratings for most of their paints, which means they're going to hold up the best to the colors are going to hold up the best over time. Arteza has 2 and 3 Lightfast for most of their paints, so even though it has more pigment, it could potentially, if put into harsh sunlight or a lot of fluorescent light, could lose its color after 50 years or so. So one thing to take note of, but for right now, honestly, I'm going to start working more with the Arteza and Blick just because of the results of this test. Now, I do realize that other colors, you know, red, yellow, all of those other colors are going to have different results, and this is just specific to phthalo blue. But if the rest of the paints are similar to this, this was a pretty wide gap, even from number 1 to number 2, 3, and 4 of the amount of pigment in the paint. And if this is the type of content that you like, please subscribe, leave us a like, and if there's other questions you have about the paints that you've used, comment below and we will get those answered as soon as possible. Thank you. See you guys next week.